Hey everybody, hope you're doing well. Carpo here once again, and I just can't really seem to put myself together and organize a way to really put this. But the way that we're treating each other, obviously, is it can be horrendous at times. And like I talked about in the previous videos, it's all perspective for a lot of people and how we view others and whether or not we fear their beliefs or their way of life. But I'm getting really irritated with the way that a lot of folks lump everyone together and call humanity them or they or the ignorant, the sheeple, whatever you want to use for it. There's an entire community of us on YouTube who talk about things like this, and I've mentioned that some of these subjects to some of the wisest and most caring people I know, and they're completely unaware of most of them. And this is where the line gets drawn between what one might call ignorance and what another might call just uninformed. Either way, ignorant has become a dirty word. You call someone ignorant, then they're going to take offense to that. But the word ignorant doesn't necessarily mean that you're dumb. It just means you are unaware of the facts or ignoring the facts, which tends to be more of the case. And as a society, we have developed this, what some may call culture and what some may call lack of culture. But I think we often have a view of how old, the ancient cultures were, and think, where did we go wrong? Where did we start taking materialism as our God? And we blame ourselves as if it's our fault, like we made mistakes, or humans shouldn't have done this, or why did humans strive to do that? And when you look at it from the perspective of, say, a man that has no money, that lives in a poor village, and you tell that man over and over, money doesn't bring happiness. Money doesn't bring happiness. But if the guy is poor and everyone's miserable and they can't afford to eat, you're not going to be able to convince him by telling him that. He's going to have to experience it on his own. So the man may earn a lot of money and develop a very happy way of life based on his income. And it may take many years, if not decades, for him to realize that the money didn't fill the void that he was seeking. But he has to experience that in order to know whether it was right or wrong. And likewise, humanity, as we grew out of the dust and created our culture, created our farming, and started herding animals, and next thing you know, we're building cities. And it's not like we made a mistake. It's just that we had, just like the guy with no money, we had nothing, and we wanted to know what it was like to have this stuff. And we started finding materials that we could build stronger things out of. We started finding chemical compositions that could cure disease, and that might have created some diseases in the process. And amongst all the confusion, there's just this huge panic. And there was a point in time where television wasn't yet adapted to base, everyone's life. I'd say back in the 40s and 50s, when it was just kind of a new thing, if you were rich, you had a TV. But back then, we couldn't see what was going on in every corner of the world. All we could see was our America, the way that it was put forth to us, the way that and the media wasn't trying to control anything at that time. Although there may have been people in charge of, the media, like there always has been. Back then, it was a little more open. I think I should think Americans back then had a strong grasp on what was important and had a strong grasp on values, but it was all misunderstood because there is always somebody behind the scenes manipulating the power. So my point to this is that we couldn't know until we experienced it whether this was right or wrong, and the experiment has turned out to be, I would call it, I don't want to say a failure, but I'd say society as we view it as a failure. But some of the things that we have brought forth from these wild evolutions of tools, machines, we can turn all this around right now. And if you're an idealist, let's say, to everybody were to start acting for the better mankind tomorrow, that would be great and dandy, but it just doesn't happen that way. But back to the people, it's not people's fault. It's not our fault as a culture. Each one of us is responsible for our own actions and for our own lifestyles. But it's like when people get hit with, say, this tornado, and this was a horrible event, this tornado in Oklahoma the other day, and it was devastating. It brought tears to my eyes, and I live far away. I've never even seen a tornado. But there are people out there who look at this and say, well, they did something wrong, God's going to punish them. And that just pisses me off. But what do? That's fear. That's people's fear of living up to what the world really is. It's a scary place sometimes, but it doesn't mean that everyone's out to get you. But on the other hand, there are the folks who say, well, that's what they get for living there. And I hear that a lot. And this is a big one for me because I was one of those guys. Years past, say 5-10 years ago, whenever people would, get hit with a big tsunami or a major disaster or an earthquake area, I would say, oh yeah, well, they shouldn't live there, they should know. I knew that was wrong. And I know that was wrong thinking today. Because it's really easy for someone who's, stable and functional and has a career to pick up and move wherever they like. But for someone who's been raised in poverty, for someone who's trapped in the slums, you can't understand another person's life. And while they may seem to be the most ignorant, unaware, misinformed, asshole that you've ever met, there's a reason for that. And it's because of society. And it's the society that we've created, each one of us. So the society we create today is going to determine whether those slums still exist tomorrow, or whether people are still living in disaster zones tomorrow. Nobody's going to ever move away from the ocean. I mean, that's just the way it's always been. We need it for our food. We need it for our ports and our transportation. It's just the way the world is. People can't just pick up and leave. You can't move cities. You can't move countries. There's nowhere left to go, people. That's the thing. People can't just move cultures anymore. So we point the finger at other people when something happens and say, well, they must have done something wrong to deserve that. Whether it be, that's what you get for living there, whether it be, well, you should have been paying more attention, whether it be, well, it must have been God's wrath because, there's homosexuals there, like when New Orleans flooded. I was just disgusted by all the people out there and all the postings about how those people had, oh, that's what they get for being sinners, and that's what they get for, all their sex and their evil deeds and whatnot. So what about Oklahoma? Huh? I mean, what about these God-fearing regions where it's just loaded up with Christians, destroyed completely? Nobody's going to say, well, they weren't Christian enough. But there will be somebody who will. There will always be somebody who says you just weren't good enough. And but then when something happens to them, oh well, it's just God's will, and He had a reason. He needs us in heaven. I'm not trying to attack religion here. What I'm just saying is these are the defensive mechanisms that we use to explain and express our angst at what goes on. And when I see the wake of destruction, say that tornado left, or, say, 9/11 to me, let's say, is a good example because look at what it did to America. It brought down our two biggest buildings, and we're just devastated for losing 3,000 or 4,000 lives. This happens every day in every other country around, not every other country, in at least one other country around the world. There's always some mass destruction, a bombing, an explosion. But we're nice and confined in our little space because we're patriots. We have to stand by our country. The reason why that's important to me to understand that concept is because patriotism is what those in power use to keep us turned against one another. If a person says, well, look at what our government's doing, people will say, hey, stick with the government. They're doing, they're doing our bidding, and this is our country, I've been told to move out of my country so many times I can't even count. You know, I've had people say to my face, "Well, if you don't like it, you should just leave." And I said, I didn't say I didn't like my country. I said I don't like the government that's running it. There's a huge difference here. So, but likewise, just like the people who I'm saying won't, they can't just escape from where they live. Well, I'm not going to run from where I live because I see things going wrong. You can't escape yourself. So ultimately, we're seeing society reflected back through our own eyes, and that's where the perception comes in. If you're a person who sees negativity constantly in society, then there's probably something negative within yourself that you need to work on. And if all you see is positivity, then maybe you're on the right track. And these are just my opinions, but they're based on years of research into the psyche and people in general, and behavior observation. And it all comes down to the fact that wisdom is something that doesn't come with any amount of book knowledge, nor any amount of just aging. You have to experience to have wisdom, and you have to live experience. I'm not saying I'm wise. I'm saying that these are the things that we all realize later in life to say, wow, this is what really life is really about. So if I can leave on one note, I would say we should stop blaming each other for living where we live, or for doing the things we do, or claiming that it's God's will. Anything that is a God's will would be way beyond anything a human could comprehend. So trying to tell someone what God's will is would be the ultimate sin for any religious person. You don't make those decisions. Those decisions are natural law, and that's just how it works. So when we have an event, say, that wipes out a bunch of people, everyone's going to come together and say, this is horrible, look at what nature's done, let's wage a war on nature. Yeah, I watched a really funny video about that, the war on nature. It's kind of like a little mockumentary or something, can't remember, but we want to fight back as if we can do something. What we need to do is just give in to nature, because nature is doing what is right. So the perspective that if humanity's wiped off the planet, that if that's a bad thing, well, in someone else's eyes or another creature's eyes, it might be what's necessary to perpetuate new lives and new species. We're definitely not the be-all, end-all of the universe. And we're so confused today. We tie in so many different ideas, and there's so many things going through our head. I mean, we're worried about, disclosure on aliens while we're being raped through taxes and our food's being poisoned. We just don't know where to put our anger and to come together so we can actually do something with it. I say turn that anger into action, but what action? I don't know. I'm just another guy, right? So to just let the little things go and really analyze the battles that we're fighting, and just to understand that nature has a cause and a purpose for everything. And even if you don't believe that, even if you believe it's all chaos and nothing matters, and it's all just by chance, the fact still remains that we're all humans, and we all have to live here together. So if we could put ourselves in others' shoes a little bit, I think we might have a better understanding of ourselves. And maybe this could be a completely different place, but I don't know. I don't know. I'm not an idealist. I'm a realist, but not to the extent that I'm going to let if I was a complete realist, I would let the fact that I would let the deeper thoughts in my mind come to the surface, which are the dark thoughts, the thoughts that humanity is fucked and we deserve what we get. Look what we've done to ourselves, and those things I've had to remove from my mind manually to say no. The universe doesn't evolve to this point, so we can just be a mistake. It just doesn't make sense to me. But I say I ended up getting off track, but in the end, it all comes back to the blame and to how we see one another. And I picture myself as a poor black guy growing up in the slums with, a mother and father that are fighting or something, or maybe being abused. I'm not saying black, it could be white, it doesn't matter. I'm just saying, some of the most suppressed people in our society are the lower class black male that's in the inner city. I mean, and I have heard people say, well, they should just get out of there and, do something. And I'm just, it's appalling to me that people really think it's that easy for everyone. And I have a very, very strong place in my heart where I hold a lot of empathy for those who grow up poor and remain poor. And to tie it all up, I just, what it comes down to is a lot of people will say, well, they get older, they learn responsibility, they're obligated to go out and do something and make something of themselves. But it all comes down to perception, how you see the world. And if they see the world as a scary place where they're suppressed, then that's how their mind's going to work, because our brains adapt. We have muscle memory. We have muscle memory just in our brain. I mean, you develop a certain part of your brain. If you're a mathematician, you're going to develop that part of your brain. If you're an artist, you're going to develop that part of your brain. And when we start developing to these points, we go way down one path where we learn something really well, and then we assume everyone else should just be able to do that. And it just doesn't work that way. And it doesn't make them lesser people. And we can't say, well, that they're just lower class or their bloodlines are bad or anything like that, because DNA is light, and light can be altered at any point in time. So where we're at is right where we're at and where we're supposed to be. It's like they say that the DNA can change overnight. It happens in a lot of species. It can happen in a very short period of time. And if humanity's headed down the wrong path, then nature will correct itself. But until then, I hope that each person would just take to heart to understand that not everybody has the ability to just pick up and move from where they live because it's dangerous, and likewise, not everybody has the ability to heal themselves because they don't feel they're mentally able. So it's up to each one of us to at least find one person in our daily life that we can instill some sort of a hope in, instead of just dismissing them as sheeple or ignorant people. So, just some thoughts. I hope you all are having a great summer. Well, it's spring, but this is summer to me if it's sunny, because I live in the Pacific Northwest. So. Thanks to all my subs too for all your great comments. Some of those really get me to think and get me to look a little deeper into some of these things, because while I might not tackle all these weird issues, like I made one about archons the other day, it's not my usual subject matter, and it's not because I'm not interested. I mean, I'm way into UFOs, aliens, and all that stuff, but I mean, I'm into like the most just strange, off-the-wall things like everyone else, but the reason why I make videos about what I do is because I'm hoping that those will make a difference. I could sit and talk about UFOs all day, but I'm not going to tell you anything you can't find somewhere else. But when I speak from my heart, at least I hope that maybe I can just get something across that helps a person change their perception a little bit. And I'm not arrogant. I'm not saying that my perception's right. I'm just saying that in my heart I feel like being human and having humanity is the most important part. Caring, loving, and sharing. So, I love you all. I really do. You are me. I am you. Namaste.